Well, hi, everybody. Kind of said hello to everyone so far, and thank you for coming and getting on the Zoom today. This Zoom is going to be recorded, so and we'll post it on our website. And I think last time we were able to go ahead and post it on Lacey Township's website. So it will be available to other residents just in case you can't make it today. Moderating today is going to be Julie. I'll tell you who I am first. I'm Captain Al Majeski. Most of you guys know me. I'm the Habitat Restoration Program Director for the American Littoral Society, and I'm working on this grant for Forked River Beach on behalf of, or funded by the state. And of course, we'll talk about the pilot project that's there now that was funded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And we're working in partnership with Stockton University and a bunch of other people. I'll introduce Julie, of course, who is our moderator today and works for me as a habitat restoration technician. Julie?
How are you guys doing? Julie Schumacher. We've been working on the pilot project for this project. We'll actually be out there today, but today I'll be moderating this webinar. Just briefly, what we want to keep this an open discussion. So as Captain Al goes through the slides, if you have a question pertaining to that slide, feel free to enter it into the chat, and then I'll, at the end of that slide, before he changes, we can address the questions pertaining to that slide. We just ask people use the chat. There is a Q&A option, which we currently have 2 questions in there. Just focus on the chat side. And probably before we even start, we can just address what questions are there now. But yeah, I'll be here to just make sure people are heard. And if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat.
Thanks, Julie. And I see the first 2 questions. I do not have the video from the 70s in this particular presentation, but I can share the link. If you want to just put in your chat your email, I can send you the link to that. I think Barry had sent that to me originally, and it was in the first stakeholder meeting, stakeholders meeting that we had. And then the other is a list of attendees. We'll generate that, I think, after the end. So that's why we had people register this time, so we could tell who was here and who was not, kind of a thing. I want to thank right off the bat, Pat, Barry, and Ed for going door to door and distributing the flyers for everybody. I really appreciate it. We couldn't have done it without you to get the people here that, you know, to kind of hear this story. I just want to let you know that this is about the grant that we have. It's not necessarily about what can be done in the interim. As much as we would like to help you, this funding is not for doing something in the interim. It's something to get done that we've been discussing now for about 6 to 8 months. And I'll go through all that just so you know, but I do talk about and do show what's been happening out in Barnegat Bay. And I want to thank Tony Fiana, who's really been our tide watchman and out there letting us know when we can come out there and do some adaptive management to the pilot, as well as taking some photographs and things for me as recently as February 4th, I think it was. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Oh, Zach, did we introduce you or?
No, so I'm Zach Royal. I'm the Habitat Restoration Coordinator for the American Littoral Society. So like Captain Al and Julie, I've been working on this project. I was there overseeing the installation of the pilot reef that is out there right now. And then going forward, working with the rest of the project team, I'll be helping out with permitting and the construction of the larger project. So,
thanks. And Pat has her hand raised real quick before we get started. So Julie, if you can unmute her real quick, we'll get her question and then we'll move forward. We're going to see most of the questions that are going to be more vocal, where we can hear your voice. We'll save those to the end, but in between we can do the chat.
Okay, I tried to do a chat.
Okay.
My screen, my camera isn't, something's wrong. Is anyone from the NJDEP on this call?
They are. So we have.
Can you identify who?
Yes, we have our project manager, who is Rachel White. She is on the call. And looking at, I can look at the quick list of participants here to see who else. Oh, I see Britta's here. Hey, Britta. That's all I see right now. There may be others. I'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute, Pat, of how we're coordinating back and forth with DEP if you're thinking of like more regulatory side of it.
No, I'm just thinking get it done side of it.
Yeah, I got you. I hear you. Thank you, Pat. All right, you can. We're gonna mute you here real quick and get into the presentation.
All right.
All set.
All right.
Okay, so guys, this is it. This is number 2 of our stakeholders meeting. We intend to hopefully continue having these stakeholders meeting throughout the process of this project at Forked River Beach. And this basically the first one, the title of the project, it's Living Shorelines. It's more oyster reef restoration here to improve water quality and resiliency to the shoreline along Forked River Beach. And we're basically applying what we've learned down in Delaware Bay to what we're doing in Barnegat Bay. And there's some different issues here that we've discussed in the first stakeholders meeting that we've addressed now, and you're going to see where we're at with the projects as well. Again, I'm Captain Al Majeski. If you want to learn more about us, you can go to Restore NJ Bayshore to see what we've done in Delaware Bay. You can see some of the work we're doing at Wreck Pond with Fish Passage, and of course, the restoration as a whole at our society website. Again, I'm with the American Little Society. For those of you who are first timers on this call and maybe weren't on the first one, the American Little Society is a nonprofit organization that cares for the coast. And we do that through advocacy, the restoration and conservation, and we do it through education. And basically what we want to do is we care for the coast and we empower others to care for the coast as much as we do. And you'll see throughout this, I know you guys are all dedicated and committed to this kind of a project here for the shoreline and dedicated to the bay. And we really appreciate you being on the call. So today's agenda is going to be pretty light. And as we move through it, like we said, if you have some questions, just put them in the chat. Julie's going to be moderating that. When we get to the end of this, or if we have time, we're going to open up to voice. We may be able to do that as well throughout, depending if you just raise your hand, and we'll try to get to you as soon as we can. Today, we're going to talk about the team and the project, just a reintroduction. Where did we start? You know, what was on the team originally? Who was it? Who we partnered with? And who might we have added already? And then what the project's going to be still. Current issues. And this is what, you know, I was just down there in, a couple weeks ago, guys, we were down there, or last week before the storm.
Last week.
Zach and Julie are down there quite a bit, monitoring what we have out there in the pilot to make sure it's shifting, if it's sinking, or what's happening to it. So we can really kind of figure out what's going to be the preferred methodology. But we're seeing this increased erosion. We're seeing the loss of habitat and, you know, the encroachment of property on property lines. I want to talk about the project status, and that's going to include, we talked last time about design. We had a really conceptual design. We're a little bit farther than there now. The video pitch deck, some of you might not know, but we do have some of you here on the call who are now rock stars, pretty much, I guess to say, for a better choice, who are in this video. And it's very rough right now, so we're still kind of editing it and things like that before we can release it to the public. Talk about the pilot project, which you've probably already seen out there, some of the work that we've done. And then I want to get into the permitting status of it all. And then the outreach, will continue with that. And then in final, I just wanted to differentiate between what we're funded for and then what we hope would fall forward after the fact that we do the work we're doing. So here's the project team, guys. And again, I want to thank funding from NJDEP, of course. They're sponsoring the larger project. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who's our partner on this as well, helped fund the pilot project. So thanks, guys, for helping us out here and helping out Forked River Beach. So, of course, we're the American Little Society. We're the project lead for this. We just introduced ourselves, so you know who we are. And you'll see our smiling faces down there quite a bit. Stockton University, they've been involved here for up to 10 years. They've done some baseline monitoring already for us. They're working on design with us as well as with our engineering firm, Wegel Engineering. Barnegat Bay Partnership is on the call today. I'm Martha, and they're acting more as a liaison for us and possibly doing some of the monitoring that we need to get done on the shoreline area. And then we have U.S. Fish and Wildlife, of course, which I already mentioned, not only funding, but they provide support through their coastal program and their partners program. And then Apex Imagery will be doing some drone flights to kind of give us more of a time sequence of what we're doing, when we're doing kind of a thing, and how it's affecting stuff over the long term of, say, the shoreline movement, erosion, or stabilization or accretion. Parsons Mariculture, I don't know if Dale's on here or not, but Dale is the guy who will be helping us set oysters, as well as providing some technical support and guidance, possibly with submerged aquatic vegetation. And then, you know, what we think the oysters can do and how long it's going to take for them to kind of really create that great structure that we're thinking of. Reclaim the Bay is going to be helping us out with building the reefs. And Atlantic Capes Fishery is providing some shell. Bayside Beach Club, of course, you guys know that. You guys are part of that. If not, you live right near there. The Bureau of Shell Fisheries, this is one of our first projects working from the ground up with the Bureau of Shell Fisheries, and they've been great. They've been instrumental in really helping us figure out what was preferred, what they feel comfortable with for, you know, the habitat or the natural element of this. It's been a great partnership so far. And then of course, we just added in Citizen Race Car. Citizen Race Car, they are a filming crew and they're basically putting our video pitch deck together and looking towards, well, I'll get into this, really exciting, but looking at how we may be able to get more national exposure of the project and of the issues in the Bay. So for our project, our grant, we have basically 6 different project goals, and I'm just gonna say them real quick, and you probably remember this from the first stakeholders meeting. We want to restore and enhance approximately 26 linear feet of shoreline and set up to 70 million oyster larvae on these structures. And basically, we're going to position these structures in a way that they take on the main brunt of the physical characteristics of the bay, and then they'll protect that shoreline behind them. We want to increase the resiliency to the community. So you can see some of the homes here and the erosion in the background here. We want to kind of stop that and minimize that and hopefully turn it around by placing these structures here. We want to reduce shoreline erosion, of course, and that's through wave attenuation, and that's what the reef structures are intended to do and have been designed to do that. We want to improve local water quality and decrease turbidity. By stopping the erosion or minimizing the erosion, that would decrease the turbidity, and that's what the major marker here is for water quality by the state. That's what we've seen. So if we can reduce the turbidity, that means we're doing our job of keeping the shoreline intact as best as we can. We also want to improve the ecological health of the bay and its designated use. And you're going to see, as we kind of talk about in the end of the phase 2 approach, some of the outreach that we're going to be bringing into this, how that all kind of works into the ecology of it. Because right now, the majority of the shoreline is just very short stem grasses, short roots. And we would like to see more native plantings in the later on, but not for this grant that's funded right now. But I think they go hand in hand in connectivity. And then we have existing outreach already through past grants, and I'm going to let you know how we're expanding that. So some more ideas have kind of come through the brainstorm process, and now we even have a broader, not broader, but a more in-depth, more breadth of scope on outreach to really get the message out there about the work we're doing and the issues of the bay. So here's the plan. You might remember this from the first. So this is just kind of a broad-based, kind of a conceptual look before I get into the bigger design. But we want to identify the best natural structures that meet the goal. Originally, you know, and I'll talk about this, we had thought bringing it back from Delaware Bay, we would do bag shell, stack it up like we did in Delaware Bay, and everything would be great. Well, it's a little bit different here just because the tide regime is a little bit different. We have 6 to 8 feet down in Delaware Bay. We have a ½ a foot here. How do you set these bags and be able to see them? The water's kind of turbid and stake them in. So it just wasn't going to work. That's why we went ahead and we're funded. Thankfully, we're funded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife to look at some other techniques that we can incorporate here that would really do the job that we want to do to meet the goals that I just talked about in the previous slide. We want to create about 8 to 10 double road reefs. These are roughly between 100 and 200 feet long. And I'll go in more detail at. They're about 10-foot segments. They usually have about a 5-foot gap. They're kind of herringbone in shape to attenuate the wave. We do it in the double row because the waves hit it first. They kind of dissipate that energy and then they hit it again. So by the time they hopefully get to the shoreline, and this is what happens in Delaware Bay, they're already dropping sediment into the water column and not necessarily taking sediment away, but accreting sediment. And I'll give you some surprising results that we got off the pilot already, which I think you're going to enjoy to hear. We also want to create, if you look down to the bottom of this picture, there's a little green polygon. We want to create a terminal groin, and it's a living terminal groin as best as we can do it. We think that we may or may not put it in this cycle. The only reason being the terminal groin is there to catch downdrift sand. And we haven't really added, we're not going to add sand to this system yet in this grant especially, but hopefully in future endeavors, we can get the sand to add there. But that would stop the sand from going into the lagoon, which we think would be pretty crucial for people who want to get in and out of that lagoon. Of course, as part of this, this is a water quality grant, as well as a resiliency grant and a restoration grant. So we will be doing water quality testing, and we'll be doing some biological monitoring to see what kind of ecological uplift that we do have through the project. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things by adding those 70 million oyster larvae that will, and Dale from Parsons Mariculture is the one who will be setting those larvae on a land base, and then we'll be bringing them out to the site itself as we start the restoration. And again, the plan, of course, expanding outreach. And we've learned a lot. When we got the grant, the COVID limitations and restrictions were not there, but now they are. And we've been able to really take our minds and be more creative, and working with you guys as well, kind of pivot a little bit for COVID-19 when it comes to some of the outreach and what we have to do ahead of time. So, you know, some materials may take longer to get. Getting things through the process might take longer to get just because of COVID and where everybody's at now, kind of at that lockdown, stay at home. So we've really kind of taken that into consideration with all the planning, and you'll see that later in the presentation. So we know the issues, and I talked about this last time. Severe shoreline erosion, about 108 feet is what we calculated was lost since 1995. When I last did this presentation, that was around 2017 is what I had calculated. So now what I can see is, you know, in 2017, you lost about 19.8 feet. And then talking with Tony and some others, you know, there, a lot more has been lost. And it looked like possibly even just this year or in the past 2 years, you've lost about another 12 feet. So the bay is definitely migrating landward and taking that shoreline, and we're losing that shoreline. Pretty much where the pilot is, if some of you have seen it out there, and talking with Tony again, the beach used to extend out there years back, and now it's not. So the bay is right at your doorsteps from what we've seen. This, because of this, this severe shoreline erosion during storm, we've seen elevated turbidities. And that's part of what this grant is about, to kind of change that, to create not turbid water, I guess to say, a clearer water. Definitely a loss of habitat that we've seen, because you're losing your shoreline, and if that's habitat, that habitat is now in jeopardy. But on the flip side, you guys are really engaged and committed to seeing something done here, and that's what we're doing here. So I'm really glad that you can be on the call and, you know, kind of tell us some of the things that you're seeing. And, you know, as we move in towards this final design, maybe we would hope that we can incorporate some of these things and at least put them into that design in a way that benefits everything, because we're not there every day seeing what you're seeing. And what we do see here too, and I've tweaked this just a little bit, and I'll talk about eelgrass or SAV later on, but this really is setting a precedence in Barnegat Bay already. This will be a model for future bay-wide restoration and prioritization as we move forward on how do we really do restoration in Barnegat Bay with other issues like eelgrass presence, which is really critical habitat and essential fish habitat for summer flounder, juvenile summer flounder. And there's another word called habitat area of particular concern, and that's also for federally managed species like the essential fish habitat. That's what this eelgrass system is. There's a way that we think we can marry the reef structures with the eelgrass, and not only just provide improved resiliency and wave attenuation, but the habitat that's lacking more or less, or so patchy in Barnegat Bay now. So we're really on the cusp of something great here. Just wanted to show you real quick, and I know that the majority of you on here live there and you've seen this every day, but when you go back from 1995 on this time lapse and kind of move your way across, you can kind of see the changes that have been happening over the years. And they seem to be happening a lot more rapidly now. Just so you can tell. So looking at this, I think originally what I had done was I measured here, that was 108 feet. And as you kept seeing, the more you would lose from that property line as you went down. You can also see how thin the beach has gotten from 1995 to now. So I just wanted to add in that extra slide, that extra photo here of 2021 to really show you from, you know, a 30,000 foot altitude. Here's what we're seeing, you know, on your shoreline.
Captain Al, we do have one question. Are we measuring loss only on the private beach or on the public beach as well?
So we haven't measured any loss. This is all just pretty much from Google Earth. And just,
Well, what are you measuring?
excuse me?
When you say, I can't, it's Pat, these little pictures are at the top of my screen. I don't know if it's just maybe my screen. I can't see what you're pointing to. So it's not that you're measuring, but when you talk about loss until 2017 and even more loss since then, Are you looking at only the private beach, or are you looking at Google Earth on the public beach as well?
I'm looking at both, Pat.
You are, okay.
I'm picking one point, and I had shown on this a little bit farther up on the public area how thin it's getting there as well, where the beach is gone pretty much. But for this PowerPoint, I'm showing basically I just looked at one location and measured it, but as a whole, these pictures kind of show you what's happening along the entire shoreline, from the park all the way down to the lagoon.
And Pat, you might be able to change your view to have the PowerPoint be the full screen instead of a small screen. If you can go to view options, then it should switch to the full screen is the PowerPoint.
Right.
Yep. And what I'll do, I'll stop right here for a minute. And Julie, if you want to take a moment just to go through the chat to see if there's any new questions, we'll go ahead and field them real quick. I saw there's like nine in the chat. We may have answered some of them, and I see a couple in the Q&A.
Yeah, so some people are just saying hi to each other, which is awesome. People are recognizing who's on the chat, which is great. And then nothing new other than Pat, and we're just trying to help her switch her screen around. But so far, so good. So right, just as questions come in pertaining to the slide that's currently on, we'll address it.
And don't be afraid to call Zach out and ask him just right away anything you want. He has a very dark screen, so you can't see him. But
I thought I brightened it.
All right. Well, before we move on, Pat raised her hand one more time.
Well, just when I don't want to interrupt. At some point, you had said talking about our observations. So, will we have a chance as the homeowners, as the residents, to express a few observations of what's going on down here?
Yeah. So I have this call on to 2:30. So we can go from, most people probably will drop off after about an hour, but I should be done here with this presentation shortly, Pat, and
Okay.
open it up. And then as you raise your hand, yes, we definitely want to hear these things. That's why we're here, is we're moving forward with its design.
Okay.
And you see the schedule, you can understand that there's a lot of moving parts happening right now that we need to get done now so we can be ready to start later. You see what I'm saying? And
Right.
I already mentioned that before. So we have a couple more participants raising hand.
If anyone can't see the chat, you should have a button down at the bottom of your view screen that says chat, and it should pop up, and everyone should be able to see the live viewing chats coming in. And we will be sending this is recorded, so we're going to be sending out the PowerPoint presentation and
Well, the recording, yeah.
the recording. So you'll see the full PowerPoint. And
so I'm going to let him in. I didn't know that Dr. Stu Farrell from Stockton University is on from the Coastal Research Center. He was a panelist. Maybe something got crossed how to sign on, but Stu, you can talk. Can you hear us?
I'm unmuted, right? Okay.
You are.
There he is.
All right, go back one slide, would you? Point something out that we used back a bit.
This
There
one?
we go. All right, can you see right there that if my cursor showing up?
No, we can't see your cursor because you're prepared.
Down about, there's a bulge in the 1995 shoreline. All right, right in the middle is two parallel white lines.
Yes.
Those are shuffleboard courts.
Okay.
And we use those as markers to see shoreline erosion at that particular point along the shoreline as one of our points that we used. And your numbers agree quite well with that particular place in terms of the number of feet the shoreline retreated since 1995.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So that's, wow, shuffleboard courts. That's a good metric right there, or a good thing to look at.
Yes.
You can see they're pretty much gone.
Well, one is in 2020, one of the courts is just rubble.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a good reference marker in terms of shoreline retreat.
Well, thanks, Stu. And what we'll do, Stu, we'll keep you, if we can, we'll keep Stu unmuted. And then just mute the rest. I don't see any other hands up, or unless I'm missing somebody. But thanks for that, Stu. And I apologize if you couldn't get on as a panelist, but I had to you're supposed to link in that way where you'd be on the screen with us right now.
Well, I just got back from a living shoreline issue in Ventnor City, so I was in 10 minutes late.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thanks, man. So these slides, guys, these came from the last PowerPoint, but I've added some 2021 photos that Tony took over the last big storm in right around February 1st through 4th. And it just kind of drives the point home that there's a lot of erosion happening here. And I thought the shuffleboard court, I didn't even know about that. Wow, that really kind of shows you what's been happening here for sure. So yeah, we definitely have a continued loss of edge. This again degrades water quality through increased turbidity. You can see this here in the Nor'easter 2018, pretty close to property lines right here. And the waves are coming right in. Again, we have some undercut under the property of plant boxes and things like that. You can actually see right in here where it's starting to suck out the dirt from underneath where this scour is happening. And it looks like someone here had actually, at this property at least, had tried to do something to stabilize the shoreline, and it looks like a core matting. Unfortunately, either that wasn't staked down deep enough or something, but it looked like the bay actually just said, "You're not getting me on this one." So kind of took that away and started eroding everything here. Here's Bayside Beach Club. So between 2018, 2019, looking at what we had done with shells, the homeowners actually contacted the shell provider and try to do something very similar to what we do down in Delaware Bay, even though we're farther offshore, but try to create some shell sills as a temporary Band-Aid to get through the storm season. And you can kind of see it did not work, unfortunately, and don't know why. I'm going to say there's a lot of energy in the bay there as well, maybe not properly staked down as deep as they could have been, but it seemed like a lot of the shell bags were gone, and then they ended up and down on the shoreline. And here's 2021. So, you know, further on to even get hit even harder. This is around right after, we're taken on February 4th by Tony, of course. And you can see bags of shell. You can see the erosion here. You can see the undercutting of retaining walls now. And what I've seen too at high tide is the water comes all the way up past some people's steps. So the bay is definitely right licking up on your property there as well. And we've had actually 5 storms now. I guess that was the 5th one we just had, not as bad. It's been a tough winter. We're getting pounded. The only good thing out of this is really showing us the integrity of what structures we want to put in with the pilot. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. And again, one thing I put in here, and I'm going to be showing this to the regulators here in about a week, this PowerPoint as well, who couldn't make this call or couldn't make the meeting last week. We had a team meeting on the 19th, and let them know that these properties are in extreme jeopardy. So even though my grant doesn't cover anything doing something right now in the interim, I can convey that message for you, and that's what we're doing. So what is our project status? This is why we came here today, everybody. You really want to know, well, what the hell are they doing out there? And when is something going to happen? I'm guessing that could be the biggest question we probably would see right now in the chat. And feel free to type it in many times, but I'm going to answer that for you. So what we've done so far, Stockton's been out there already, and they were either partially or wholly funded by the Bayside Beach Club to do some baseline monitoring. So they've done the bathymetry out here, and you can see this right here, this background is actually the bathymetry map that Stockton created, so we can move forward more with the design and kind of really see where we want to place the reefs. So we have initial design. This you have not seen. So this was done back in May, and as you can see, again, it's the herringbone kind of or sawtooth formation of double road reefs placed around from the park to the north all the way down towards the lagoon. And we're looking at 8 sets or 8 pairs of reefs right now. Each one of them will have about a 10-foot segment with a 5-foot gap to allow critters to come in and out. You know, we're hoping that one day there's enough sand on the beach that your horseshoe crabs come back and all kinds of stuff. So we want to make sure it's accessible in that way for future. Very similar to the design kind of configuration that we have in Delaware Bay. Also, so while we've been there, and some of you are already on the video, I think Barry and Pat and Ed, I saw you guys on the video so far in the rough cut. We began filming a video pitch deck, and I'll explain what that is in just one second. We began filming in 2020. You might have seen the cameras and us all around in your neighborhood, kind of just filming about the bay. It's basically, we took a bunch of stills and are using that video to kind of pitch basically up to 6 networks. So working with Citizen Race Car right now, and I just got off the phone with him yesterday with David Hoffman from Citizen Race Car. They're going to start editing everything out from this rough cut. The team has seen the rough cut. They loved it so far. It's the title of it's called Bay People for now, and I'm getting other communications from other organizations saying, hey, we would like to help and do something similar to that. Maybe we can help and get it on as a part of that. The whole idea here is to get national exposure of the issues of the restoration being done in Barnegat Bay. So the intent is to go with this pitch deck with this kind of a sell and ask these major networks, is this something you'd like to do and shoot a documentary series or what have you throughout the life of the project and then some. So hopefully out of the 6 networks that our Citizen Race Car is setting up with us, we will get that done. If not, the video that we are creating will be a standalone video too, that we can create a standalone documentary about the work that's being done and the issues of the Bay. But, I think we should have this more finalized, edited by everyone and looked at by the end of March is what we're looking for. And it kind of falls in line, and I'll get into the revised timeline of the project, but it falls in line that gives the networks, whoever picks it up, enough time to move forward and get some of the filming that we really want to do more real time. I will say that on the phone call that I had with Citizen Race Car, we already have interest. There's one person that came forward and said he would love to produce this. He knows the ins and outs of the network and how to kind of sell this kind of a docuseries. And we're probably going to add him to the team. Well, Citizen Race Car will, and he will help us go pitch this to the networks in New York City. So there's a good chance that from what's been seen from the rough cut already, people like this and they see that it has legs. So I just want to let you know that you may start seeing more video crews out there. And in our next stakeholders meeting, hopefully I can say something like, and Nat Geo picked it up and they're going to start filming. Who knows? Or Discovery Channel.
Discovery Channel.
Who knows? Who knows?
Captain Al, just before you go on to the pilot project, we have 2 questions that we can address about what has previously gone on. One is from Michael, who asked how much eelgrass do we know has disappeared in the last 15 or 20 years?
Now, are you talking about on just the site itself?
Sorry, that was Chris. Chris has asked on site, do we know how much eelgrass has disappeared in the last 15 to 20?
We do not. So I had that same question with the state. We actually have been going through different mappings to kind of see if there's SAV there or not. And they went back and looked at some maps, basically. I don't think it was mapped as thoroughly as it needs to be to really kind of give you a definite what's been lost. As Barnegat Bay as a whole, I want to say you have maybe, and Stu, you might know better than I think less than 75% of the eelgrass that was there originally over the past 20, 30 years. So you're losing the eelgrass, and a lot of that can be accredited to, jet skiing, fragmenting of beds, you name it. So that's the best answer I can give you right now. From what we know and talking with you guys, the residents, there hasn't been much talk of eelgrass being on site, but that doesn't mean that that's not considered eelgrass habitat that couldn't establish there. And I'll get into that momentarily.
And then Graham just asked, as far as partners and their roles, what role is Lacey Township playing in the project, and have they agreed to help restore the sandy beach around 5E Bay Front Park?
So I don't know the exact address, but I will say this: Lacey Township has been great. So Lacey Township is definitely involved. They are a partner in this project, and I probably should have put them on the partner list. They're not a funded partner. That's probably why I didn't put them in there yet. But yeah, Veronica was on the team call last week, which was great. And the head of your DPW, Department of Public Works. And we're talking with them, and I see a lot of in-kind match and partnering there. So they have concerns with what's happening there as well. And this is definitely a way that we can all come together towards a common goal. I hope that answers your question, but Lacey is definitely involved.
Yeah, and Mike, we will get to your question in a couple slides. We'll definitely go over how long the restoration project is intended to take and expected goals. So
Yep,
we'll
yep.
get to that.
Yep, I'm almost there.
Yep.
So I wanted to go and just talk about the pilot project. You've seen it out there. You probably have a lot of questions like, what is that? What are they doing out there? Well, the pilot project was funded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of their Barnegat Bay project initiative, I guess is a better way to say it, that they're doing through the American Little Society right now. They had a little extra funding due to COVID, and they called me up and said, hey, would you like to use some of this for Barnegat Bay? And I said, I sure would, because we really want to nail down what we think would be the preferred reef kind of a structure that would survive over time and has the integrity of that structure with oyster set on it that can tolerate these storms. I'm not saying it can tolerate a superstorm Sandy or a huge nor'easter or something like that, but it can do enough to protect the shoreline in the intermediate levels. So we went out, and that's Julie and Zach pretty much, and we had we worked with Atlantic Dock, Bulkhead and Lift, or Atlantic Lift Dock, anyway, out of Point Pleasant, who has been our partner before on other reefs that we've done, like at Good Luck Point. And we went ahead and installed 2 of 4 techniques. And I'm going to show you what those techniques are here in a moment. But the techniques involve 1, tensar matting, stuffed pretty much with rock or shell on the base, and then bags of shell on top staked in. Another one was tensar bags stuffed with shell and rock, and then stacked in a trapezoid kind of a shape. And then what you see out there today is called a Hesco basket is one, which is filled with a rock core, and then it's encapsulated by shell baskets. And then we have what we call oyster pens, which are kind of like a chicken wire pen that is filled with shell and actually rests upon a mattress that's filled with rock. Those are the 2 we were able to put in. I'll tell you why here in a minute, why we couldn't do all 4. Thanks to DEP on that and the regulatory, they expedited our permits, and as well as the Army Corps. And we were able to get this in to really kind of see that the whole goal of the pilot was, is this going to hold up during the storm season? And we've had quite a storm season to really kind of see which structure is going to be the best. And I'd like to say that other municipalities have been watching, and Stu can attest to this, but Seaside Park is looking to do something similar to what we're suggesting here at Forked River Beach, and which we will be doing at Forked River Beach. Lavalette is another community that's very interested in what's happening here. So everything we're doing here is getting a lot of notice from the other municipalities who are in the same seat as you, basically. Again, as you can see, this was set up pretty similar to what the larger project is going to be, even though this is a fraction of that project. 2 double road sections, each 10 feet by about approximately 5 feet. They're about 4 feet high. And then Julie, Zach have been monitoring this continually, as well as Stockton has been doing it. And we're comparing notes together. So Stockton has all the equipment and stuff to really look at what's happening. We don't. We do more observations and photos and kind of old school, and just talk back and forth with Stockton. I will say that what Stockton has noticed so far is what we've noticed too, and I'll get into that in a moment, but these things have not shifted. They have not settled from what we can see, at least especially for the preferred. And we have been accreting some sand. So not a lot, but in the time that it's been there, I want to say it's been about, and Stu, it's either 0.04 or 0.4, but about I'm going to say 0.4 inches of sand around these structures, which is good because that's something that we were wanting to see. If we're going to lose some of that shoreline, we want to keep it within that system of where those natural reef structures are. So here's what was deployed. And you have Hesco baskets, and we also have the Pre-Fab cages, which I'm calling the oyster pen for a better choice of words. The Hesco baskets, these are actually brought into me on a discounted rate. These are barriers that they were going to use at the United Nations. So there's actually a mile of this available for us, which is a great thing. They're basically 39 inch by 39 inch by 39 inch cubes. And on the outside of these cubes, it's a 9 inch by 39 inch basket, closed basket that we put shell in. So on the interior of the cube itself, the 39 by 39 by 39, that's filled with rock. And that really anchors everything in. And then on the outside and on the tops, which we're going back now and redoing the tops, we figured out how to really install them through this pilot to make sure they stay strong, is shell. And that shell would be set, of course, with oysters. So that would kind of help us with the water quality piece. maybe future resiliency of this as the oysters start setting and growing upon themselves. This structure then becomes a more natural structure in time over the next 2-3 years. The other one, the prefab cages or the oyster pens, that's more of a chicken wire, kind of a looser kind of a structure. That was filled with shell on the top 3 feet by 3 feet by 10 feet. And then there's a mattress underneath, which I see really good areas where we can use these mattresses for shoreline around the state, stuffed with shell too, to dissipate wave energy. But that was filled with rock, and then the baskets on top are wired into that. And that was the second one we did. So you can see the cross section of the plan view here to kind of better explain that. What wasn't deployed, what we talked about already, was the tensar trapezoid. And those are bagged, basically big geotextile kind of better choice, like pillows or mattresses that are stuffed either with shell or with rock and stacked upon each other. And then the other one was using it as a base to kind of get the basic shell bags that would be placed on top right at that tipping point. So about 12 inches off the ground. Those would all be set at that time when we get into the bigger project with shell or with oyster. Unfortunately, what happened is it was so cold when we're doing this in November, even working with a tensar was very difficult. And personally, I didn't really like the material that we were working with. I didn't think it had enough breathable space that I was looking for to have oyster growth. And we decided not to put it in. And the other reason is because it's very expensive. So just a 10-foot segment or 2 10-foot segments, just for the tensar, was about $3,000. And we would price ourselves out of this grant trying to do that on every site. So it basically wasn't cost effective, and it wasn't appealing to me in the way to promote that ecological uplift that we're looking for. They may have worked for the resiliency. I don't think the bags would have worked as well. I think we'd have lost a lot of bags and spent more money trying to stake them all in all the time. The tensar might have worked, but the two that we did look at, we learned a lot. And I'm going to tell you kind of what we learned. Here you can see a picture of them. In the front, that is the oyster pen. Okay, so that's the one that's a little more wobbly, filled with shell. This is first day deployment right out the bat. And then you can see in the background there, that's the Hesco baskets. And you can see on the top, the lids of shell, and along the sides, those rock faces. They're called rock faces by the company. I'm calling them shell faces. They're shell faces that encapsulate that whole reef. So you have a rock core and then shell on the outside. So you're kind of getting double your money with wave dissipation or wave energy dissipation with a shell, kind of breaking that up a little bit. But then you also have this cool rock kind of a core habitat, which attracts different species that you might not see in the shell. What we did learn is it's definitely going to be a multiple barge based deployment. So it's not just, we did the pilot, one small barge. He was really riding low with all the stuff on there. Definitely for staging, we know that logistically what we could figure out here is you're going to have the multiple barges, a larger staging area. And then yesterday or the day before's discussion, we think we really came up with a sequence of how to involve volunteers as well to this. Because part of the project was doing the bag shell, was having volunteers bring out and build the reefs. So how do we do that now? And how do we do that in COVID as well with social distancing? We think we've got it nailed. I can go into that a little bit, but I'd rather hear your questions and stuff later on. But we have a sequence of how we're going to do that. I'm going to present that to the team and to Reclam, who's going to be some of the captains of getting these teams together of volunteers. We do see land-based staging. I think I found a great marina just right around the bend that has a lot of area that we can use forklifts possibly and build things, stage stuff, and have it all ready to go. So when we do have our set shell come in, we can get it right out there as quickly as possible, so we don't lose the oyster. We know that there is some deployment needs. So these structures are not necessarily as strong as you would think. They're not iron, 5 feet in diameter or something like that. So we have to build some sort of cribbing underneath to support them as we lower them into the bag. And we figured that out. And then we also learned that there is tide challenges. Unfortunately, when we're trying to go out there and do some adaptive management, the tide's always just too deep. The day that we go out to put these things in, the tide's a blowout tide and you can actually walk out to everything. So we know that's not as usual as possible as it could be, but fortunately we're going to ride the high tides and work around those tide cycles. We already knew we needed to do that. So I'm already kind of giving you a heads up of what the preferred was out here. Material needs. So if Hesco, the Hesco baskets, which you can see here in the background, we're going to need about 811 cubic yards of 4 to 6 inch rock. We learned the size of rock that we really need here. I think we went, Zach, what, 5 to 7 originally because we had it. And that's great to hold down, but it kind of, it's a little bit too big. We want something a little bit more usable that we can have. That's going to cut down on the cost of shells. So we don't need as much shell as we thought we needed at the beginning. We only need about 686, and that's the science guy. I mean, I could have rounded to 670, I guess, but 686 cubic yards of whole shell needed. What we're looking at now is a resource, and we're going to settle on this. Jetty Life had called me or emailed me yesterday or the day before, and Dale Parsons, they have Parsons Mariculture, one of our partners. They have shell clam. Clam looks like a better set. We're going to do a mix because what we learned here, we couldn't get as much the whelk that we used to have, the big knobby whelk. We had to go all the way down to Virginia for this shell. So we had broken shell as well as channeled whelk, which is a little bit smaller. Well, we think now we have a better opportunity to mix the clam and the whelk together. And Dale from Parsons feels that's a great idea because we'll be able to set this stuff much easier. And the oysters will like that better as we set that to kind of create this more natural structure on the outside of the Hescos. So that's where we're going. And like I said, there's 1 mile of Hescos available to us that you see out here at a discounted rate. So everything is going to fall within our budget that we've already kind of said we'd have in the beginning. It's just going to be appropriate a little bit different on materials. So instead of all this money for shell, it's going to kind of even out where it's going to be shell, rock, and the Hesco baskets together as that one piece. And then we're still talking about set options. That's in discussion. Set being, how are we going to set the spat of the oyster on the shell and move it back and forth? And I think we figured that out yesterday. So here it is, Hesco versus Pre-Fab. I already let the cat out of the bag. You guys know who the winner is here. It's the Hescos. Hooray, go Hescos. What we saw, and Steve's not on the line, I don't think, but Stu can probably tell a little bit more. We saw no movement or settling. So between our observations and what Stockton did, we saw that these things are pretty much standing strong for the Hescos. One of the best things that we saw while we're out there, February 17th. So what we did see, if you look on over here, you can see the Hesco before, the Hesco after. The good thing is none of the rock came out. The rock stayed. We lost these lids, and we think that we got the lids back. But that's when we're out there February 17th. We lost the lids because we basically were using commercial or recreational crab hog rings. They didn't really hold this in place very well for the first storm at all. So I talked to the manufacturer. They gave us some heavy duty hog rings that they recommend will keep that down. We have like these little mini machine guns that let you put those hog rings on. And then we're actually using these springs or spirals for the middle, and we're going to reattach these lids. So you'll probably see myself, Zach, and Julie out there, especially tomorrow, you'll see us. We may attach them, we may not tomorrow. It depends what our schedule is and working with the tides, but you're going to see these lids go back on, and we know how to keep them on now. So while we're out there February 17th, we're pulling these things up, and thank goodness Zach worked out through this whole COVID experience, because I was a little weak myself, being almost 50 years old, but I tried, and I got really cold in my hands, and Dale Carson says I'm a wimp, but anyway, what we saw coming out of these things, a lot of eel, American eel. I mean, nice size eel, good striper bait for me, but just coming out of this, and we're used to seeing them in our other projects that we've done on the bay with hanging shell bags and stuff like that, and where we grow oysters in Ocean Gate. But we saw a lot of eel. I would say half dozen to a dozen or more coming out of these Hescos. So we're already providing good habitat and refugia for some species. It also provides multi-dimensional habitat. So the rock and the shell, I'm really curious as we move forward to sample and take a lid off and sample the shell. What I did see there already were some sponges and barnacles and things like that. That's so almost like a jetty type of a life in there with probably little crabs mixed in there and things hiding. We did see also some bowing. We think the bowing of the structure was caused by the rock and how we deployed these things. So we know that we can improve the shell face attachment. We're doing that probably next week or tomorrow. We're going to use smaller rock to prevent that bowing, hopefully get the larger shell. We already figured out one thing we had to do here, because the shell that we used was smaller, we lined each one of these shell faces on the Hesco with chicken wire, and that seemed to work well. So if we have to, when we get the smaller shell, I think the clam and the whelk mix, we won't have to do that, but we can line these all with chicken wire as well, and that'll have a life of a couple years too. Less shells needed now. The Hesco seem very cost effective, which I told you, the discounted rate for the United Nations stuff. And there's a lot of volunteer opportunity now to fill the shell faces, take shell out to them, all kinds of stuff that we can do here to really engage the community and move this project forward in a positive direction. So that brings us, we're almost done here, guys, and thank you. I'm going to try to make this short so we can open up to some more questions. Permits. So where are we? Well, we did our joint permit processes meeting, and if you're not familiar with what a JPPM is, we meet with the federal regulators and we meet with the state regulators and introduce the project. And when we do that, they come, the state and the federal entities will come back and say, well, here's some of the things that you have to think about as you're going through this permitting. Do they like the project? Is the project even permittable? And yes, it was. So we went through that whole process. We took the design and we've kind of looked at the technique now that we have for the pilot and the Hesco, and that's going to be incorporated in the design. So Stockton University is working on it already, as started actually February 18th to really start tweaking that design you saw initially. Now we're going to put that in and say, well, here's what we're using, these Hesco baskets, and we're going to be moving forward. We have the final reef configuration. What you saw there, that configuration is what we prefer right now. But, and this comes up to the question that someone asked about eelgrass and SAV. This is still going to be considered SAV habitat. The state has already told us that we have to wait at least until May to go out and do an SAV survey. Stockton University is going to do that for us. We can assist as well. And we're going to map the SAV out there. And that may change how we have to do the final configuration of these reefs. To let you know, the discussion that we've been having with Shell Fisheries, who's been our partner since day one, which has been fantastic, there is a possibility, like I said, of marrying the two, the SAV and the structure, to kind of create this double resiliency and wave attenuation. If there is SAV out there, we've been talking where we want to put the structures. We've been talking about relocating that SAV and putting it to the lee of the structures. So now we're transplanting to the lee of that, and also talking with Dale Parsons in the state as well about possible land-based growing of eelgrass and placing that in front of it as well. So there's almost like a mitigation to the restoration if we have to go that route. The last map I saw didn't show any SAV out there. It showed it south of the lagoon, but historical mapping still shows that SAV was there. So from a regulatory standpoint, that still makes it SAV habitat. So we just have to know where the SAV is. We have a project description now under development for the permitting, and that's what Zach and Julie will be working on because we know we're going to do what we have out of the pilot. Part of the pilot too, Julie's been working on this as well, is we have a monitoring report that's coming out of the pilot because we want others that are attempting to do this type of restoration to have some guidance to, hey, we've already gone through this and this is what we found out. And we'd love to build upon that with other restoration practitioners as we continue to improve Barnegat Bay. We identified logistics and staging. We know that's dependent upon permit conditions. Once we see what our permit conditions are, and I'm having a meeting March 11th with the regulatory people just to say, I need to know this information now because of COVID. I have to order all my materials and get everything ready to go now. The shell actually is, luckily the shell has been curing for over 6 months, the majority of it, but shell has to cure for 6 months before we can put it in the water. So we should be all set there for deployment later on. And I'm going to show you the revised schedule right now. So implementation is going to be set by Shell, resources, and of course the availability of resources, but also when we can set the Shell. So there's a couple different drivers here for the project. So the timeline, and we're almost done here. The pilot was in place in November 2020. We've already started revising design and getting the permitting in place for the bigger project. Like I said, the pilot project, that was expedited. So now that we've learned what we've learned, we're moving into the bigger project. I have discussion, like I said, March 11th again with DEP, that's Bureau of Shell Fisheries, and the regulators, as well as some of the federal entities. We want to continue quarterly stakeholder meetings, probably April or May. As things develop and we have something to tell you, I want you guys to know we feel it's very important that you're in this every step of the way, at least that we can get you in. I don't want to just have a meeting and repeat the same things. I want to give you new things and let you know that there's forward movement and that there's momentum to the project. I think that's really important. Again, we know what we got to do for material acquisition. Outreach is on track. Again, that may change slightly due to COVID-19. Part of that is stakeholders with Pat, Barry, Ed, everyone kind of passing out flyers and things like that and printing. We're using that as in-kind match too, because that's voluntary services. We appreciate what you guys are doing and your dedication and commitment to the community. And that's kind of how we do it. Originally, we planned all these different volunteer events. Unfortunately, we couldn't do them last year, but I think that we're going to kind of a more relaxed kind of a COVID restriction as we move forward, where we can do things by social distancing and masks. And that's what we're planning on right now. So we're looking all in all, everything goes correct. And it should. The May survey, we get the permits in place. Everyone's on board with what we're doing here. We should have the reef started by August to September. I put September there just to be cautious, but I think that's probably when we really can. I would think right after Labor Day would be the best because you won't have as much boat traffic. It depends, and I'd like to hear from you, what you think, but once we have this thing all staged, and that doesn't mean we just start staging and getting materials. We're going to be doing that now. So that's the goal, to have everything in place when the permits come in hand. Hello? Yes, you got to go out there and work now, that kind of a thing. We'll continue our monitoring. We've been doing quite a bit already with Julie and Zach, and Stockton's been doing stuff. Once we have the reefs placed and we have set all those oysters, we're going to look at survivorship. We're going to look what's living there biodiversity wise. We're going to look at water quality. I think we have a way to test localized denitrification, which is going to be really cool. We have a group coming in to look at wave attenuation. And then again, we'll be measuring edge erosion, possibly with the drones and tying in with, I think Stockton has a way to tie in that with elevations and things too, to kind of really get an idea of what's this project doing. And then again, driven by COVID, that'll change, but we have a strong feeling that with community science and using our U.S. military veterans program, we'll be able to continue some of this monitoring that way too. So it's going to be a little more cost effective. Again, outreach, we're going to continue that with our stakeholder meetings. Tony, he's been our tide watcher, which has been great. That's all considered match, and we use that based on the hours that you've done. And there's a rate for the state. I think it's like $28.74 or 72 an hour, and we can claim that towards the grant. Community science we're going to do distance shell fill of the Hesco faces, what we've already talked about. We're going to continue our documentary pitch deck development and then go pitch it. We do a parade of boats, usually in the end of July, and that's when we take set shell out to a reef site. We may still do that at Good Luck Point, or we may be able to bring it down this way as part of a foundation, depending on where our permits are at. This year, instead of just one spat tank of growing oysters at Ocean Gate, we're going to double it up. As part of this grant, we have another spat tank, so we're going to do 2 spat tanks out there and double our production of oysters locally right there, so people can kind of see how they grow. And the kids love it. We've been doing this for years, so we're really looking forward to continuing that effort. Hopefully the COVID, like I said, will be lifted, those restrictions. We have an aquarium exhibit. If you haven't gone to Jenkinson's, go check it out. We're going to probably update that just a little bit based on this project. We still have shell recycling that we're doing in the area, and something new, and working with Pat on this as well. Our educational director, Nicole, is going to be working with Pat, and we're going to start looking at native species plantings and maritime gardening along there where all that mowed turf is. This might be another way to kind of show people that, hey, having this more diverse natural habitat promotes the resiliency of the shoreline. So here's the final phase, the final slide. So that's what we're permitted for. Here's the second phase that we had planned in the beginning and didn't make this round. It actually got cut from the grant for this round, and I understand why. We want to place up to 30,000 tons of sand. So once we figured out that these Hesco baskets and these reef structures are working, it's time to add some sand. Let's create that shoreline back, because now we can protect it as much. We have that band of SAV, hopefully, that we put in or didn't have to put in. I don't know yet. We're still in discussion. We want to create a vegetated dune system. And that dune system is going to further protect you and promote that resiliency. And then you're going to get that root mass in that you really need to kind of hold that shoreline in place. That'll involve volunteer dune plantings. We'll keep doing the spat tank at Ocean Gate, the exhibit, all kinds of things. So you can really see that there's a good second phase here. I know that Dr. John, you had talked about some of the terrapins and things like that. There's probably a way that we could eventually incorporate monitoring some of that to see how they're using these beaches and beyond, Is it providing better access? Who knows? But that's open to discussion because that's not funded yet. So we could really kind of create that second phase together. So that's what I have. You guys made it. It's been about an hour. I appreciate your time. If you have questions, we're going to open it up now to questions. You just want to either raise your hand. First, Julie's going to go through the chat and we'll go through that. If there's any other outstanding questions there that we can answer. Between myself and Stu here, he's on the phone. So thank you very much, guys. And we are definitely moving forward. I'm really glad you could be a part of this today.
All right, great job, Captain Al. I'm just going to go through what's been put into the Q&A and the chat, and we'll just address those first. Michael, you asked a question early on about how long we anticipate the project taking, the restoration taking. Captain Al just briefed on by September, we should be implementing everything. We hope to have, I know, the good majority of it done this year. There's a chance we might not get all the sections in this year, but we're certainly, once everything's in place and everything will be ready to roll, pretty much like Captain Al said, which we're working on now, so that once we have everything in place, we can just roll them out as quick as possible. So
yeah, I mean, I anticipate, we would love to get everything in this year. It's going to be, again, like I said, contingent upon permit conditions of when we can work, what's our window to work in. The grant goes out, I think, I'm pretty sure, Rachel, it goes out to like 2023. So the goal would be to have this installed as much as we can this year for the storm season coming up. And if we have to bleed into the second year, we will. We wanted to have a whole year after that, at least, of monitoring too. So, but we'll continue monitoring the whole way through. But yep, we have multiple years to get this project in, at least a couple.
Yep. Graham, you had two questions. They both kind of relate to each other about expanding the oyster reefs around the northern point towards the cove to help, slow or stop erosion in the cove area. And you were curious if the gabion wall that currently exists at the park could be used to be pulled down and surrounded with shell like we're using with the Hescos. I guess we're only funded to do what we're funded to do, but Captain Al, if you wanted to talk about, down the road, could there be expansion on either end going towards the cove north of our current location, possibly using other materials to help fund it or help cover some of the costs of it?
Well, I mean, you're right. And Stu, you can chime in on this in a moment too, because it's going to be dependent too on what's been modeled and what, Stockton's seen is what's going to be the best kind of configuration. You're right, Julie. Our grant doesn't include removing any kind of a gabion structure or using them in any way as part of this. That would be a whole different permitting strategy, I think, than for what we're already doing. Can it be done in the future? It's anything's possible. It's just not. It's not the goal of this grant. Ours is to more surround the town with these reef structures and minimize erosion and improve water quality. Right,
and just the interest in down the road, potentially expanding it north of the park further than where it currently is.
Yeah, sure, but I just don't know exactly where.
It's not pertaining to this grant, right?
Yeah, you couldn't do it within the channel itself because that's navigational waters, and you're limited to only going 6 inches high there when you're
right.
In the channel. But yeah, across from Forked River, I guess you could, and there's other projects out there proposed already up and down Barnegat Bay, but they're all watching, kind of seeing what we're doing too.
Right. Kim and Andy, they have a question regarding with 2 DEP representatives in attendance, what are their thoughts regarding reclaiming the sand that was lost from the beaches and ended up in the back lagoons? Is it possible to utilize the sand in the back lagoons to replenish the shoreline? I'm not sure if Rachel or anyone else from DEP currently would be able to address that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question in itself, and that's a great question. But that's not part of this grant, but maybe as part of phase 2, is that a strategy that we employ? So I'm glad you brought that up, so that there is a possibility that, if we have that there, is there a partnership between I don't know, whoever could dredge the channel. Anything's possible. So that I'm glad you brought that up because that puts it out there now.
Yeah. So if anyone from DEP wants to, if you have any comment about that, just throw that in the chat and I'll find it regarding anything regarding that. Jerry Weber asked, has there been any analysis done on the change in water levels in the bay since 1995? Is there any expected impact of the effectiveness of this project should the bay experience rising levels in the next 5 to 10 plus years?
Stu, you out there?
Yeah.
Yes. Sea level rise in the bay is somewhere in the range of, 6 inches since about 1950. But the data on it is usually comes from the USGS tide gauges that are spread across the length of Barnegat Bay. And taking that data, it is between 4 and 6 inches since the 1950s, as far as we can tell.
Nice.
Thank you.
Just trying to find, sorry, it's just hard to scroll. Lisa asked, ballpark, when or how much do we anticipate a visual addition to the beach from this project? I guess we can just say that, I guess, Captain Al, if you want to address, do you anticipate seeing a...
Maybe unmute her or something, because what do you
Right.
mean by visual addition?
Right, Lisa here, I'm allowed to talk. Lisa, are you with us?
I'm here.
Hey,
Okay.
Lisa.
Hi. I'm wondering when do you see over the next years, because I know this is just a test pilot, when do you see either the water receding or having more land near the homes where the test pilot is happening?
So
Like, will there be a visual if you were to look at it from a drone?
we hope so. That's what we're going to be monitoring. I can't tell you what the rate of accretion or the rate of beach is going to come back with these structures in, and not the pilot. You're referring more to the bigger project.
Right.
Yeah.
Providing all those
we wouldn't see
swell.
much change at all, but like I said, from the pilot, we saw, I think, just in the time it's been there, a couple months, 0.4 inches around the pilot already. So
Right.
Who knows? And that's what we're going to be monitoring. But the idea and the concept is, if you put this out there, you're going to see some changes, at least some addition. May not necessarily be right on the shore. It might be between the shoreline and the structure itself too.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. And I hope I answered that right, Stu.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Someone asked, will the groin at the point still be installed to prevent the sand going into the back lagoon?
Yes.
Yep.
That's the plan. In our discussion we had last week, I was trying to kind of weigh it out a little bit. How important is that terminal groin right now for the phase that we're at? So while doing the reef work, is it as important as it is if we had the sand in place? And it was agreed upon that let's get the reefs in first. The funding that's left over, we should be all right in budget. That's what we're really trying to make sure we are. And do the terminal groin, but that's going to be the last piece that we put in right now for this. Originally, the project was proposed as reefs, add the sand, add the, everything. We're not adding the sand right now, and that was the major need for that that terminal groin for the catching the downdrift sand.
Tony and Chris, his neighbor, are next to each other. So Tony is where we've been staging some of the parts for the pilot project and where the pilot project can be visible. He asked, similar to what Lisa asked, is how soon might we see improvements regarding erosion? He's seen quite a bit since November. We can attest that just by the storms that have happened since we've been monitoring, since we put in the pilot, have been pretty significant. So I imagine.
Well, I mean, not quite a bit, but we've seen that there's definitely a trend,
right.
Forward. And Stu, I don't think we can really predict how quick of the accretion rate is. I don't think you've done any kind of stuff.
Well, there's no sand source until you put the sand physically there from some quarry source or some dredging project that produces 90% sand. there's no supply of sand. The offshore material is fine grained and spread out very thinly. So, the accumulation of material will be dependent upon a beach restoration that happens after the terminal groin is replaced, because there once upon a time, there was right at the very southern end of the beach, there was a marina.
Yeah.
And that marina was abandoned because it kept filling in with sand. And they kept putting the sand in the parking lot and up there near the base of the terminal groin. That material, if it's 90% sand, can go directly onto the beach at any time that it gets excavated. But
That's right.
the process is, you've got to go at it and go find the material, and this has to be a reason to go out there and dredge it. But that kind of source of the material is always possible if there is a supply of 90% by volume sand.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Pat asks, are the baskets going to be visibly marked? Are they going to be visibly marked? So right now we have channel markers. We actually had to reinstall them yesterday. They got knocked down, but I guess you're asking specifically, are the Hesco units themselves going to be visibly marked?
I'd like to make the comment that it is very difficult to see your markers. And it truly is. I wondered if they would have some kind of a colored aspect to them or a light, because I walk 3 miles around this beach every morning, and especially on on any day, it is difficult to see the markers that have been put down there.
Yeah, that's because they were underwater.
No, they were not. They were sticking up. These are the poles that are way up above them.
So Pat,
go ahead.
They meet the U.S. Coast Guard has certain regulations of how to put up navigational hazard markers. And those markers are a diamond. And what we do as part of that is we can make them larger if we need, depending on what is in our condition of our permit. That'll come from the federal side. It's a diamond, and we put reflector tape on it. So you'll see the orange reflector tape on both sides. You should see it. So yeah, they're small, but they're made more for the boats to see as they get closer to the structure itself. And also as another requirement, most likely to the permits, once these structures are put in place, we have to provide those coordinates to NOAA, because then they're going to go onto a nautical chart.
We're also looking at installing them differently from how we did with the pilot. So they'll be more robust in the full project. So you shouldn't see them where with our pilot here, some of them were laying down, they got a little damaged. So when we do the actual full project, we'll change them up a little bit so they're more upright and they remain that way.
Yeah, one thing that we are looking at this project for, and we know about ice. We've been thinking a lot about ice ahead of the pilot. We were hoping originally to have some icebreaker put in. For this project, the larger project, and we're going to have the discussion next week or the week after with everybody, is putting in at least along that 200-foot piece pilings every so often, and those pilings would have attached to them hazard markers, just so you know. And that the idea here is that not a lot of pilings. I don't want to see a pile field out there. I don't think you guys want to see that either, but one every so often, maybe 3 on each side of a 200-foot length, enough to kind of put out that polygon, mark it, and then break some of the ice up as it comes into these areas. So that's what we're looking at. Very minimal, but at the same time, it'll have a big impact.
Okay.
Joe has a question regarding SAV. He says, regardless of where it's been determined that the best location of the reefs are, the surveys show there is SAV, and will it have an impact on those locations unless the SAV is relocated or additional planting takes place? So if you want to address any SAV.
So repeat that again.
Yeah, sorry. I'll just read the whole statement. Sorry, try to summarize
please.
it. As it stands now, regardless of where it has been determined that the best location for the reef is, if the survey shows SAV, it will have an impact on those locations unless concessions are made for SAV relocation or additional planting, as you mentioned. Is
Right.
that accurate? And
Yep.
what is your opinion about the effect this might have on the success of the project?
That's a good question. I think, so I'm pretty excited a little bit about this because, like I said, it sets a precedence in Barnegat Bay of how to do some restoration. SAV is so important in Barnegat Bay. Like I said before, it's essential fish habitat. It's designated by the federal government as habitat area of particular concern. It really provides something in Barnegat Bay that's important, extremely important. It also can provide, from the research I've read, great wave attenuation. So regardless of how we have to configure these, and like I said, we're talking with the state, and so far they seem on board to ideas that we have about either relocation. So that means that what we have shown would be the best configuration. If we're not on a bed, that's one thing. If we are on a bed, are we going to be able to relocate that bed to the lee of the structure? We're hoping that we can, because, and the state's open to that. There was a recent presentation done at a Restore America's Estuaries Conference, and it talked about collecting the material, collecting the plants themselves, and then putting them in a bag, like a mesh bag, and staking them to the lee of stuff. And it worked. I know it's very difficult and challenging to actually restore SAV. And that's been kind of the big thing in the Bay for many, many, many years. It's usually about a 10% survivorship of when you put it out there. But we're going to be creating this more quiescent, kind of a calm area where the establishment can be improved. So that's the concept. I see it, like I said, as a great marriage of really an ecological uplift and promoting that resiliency.
Great.
I'm in the hopes that we can really try something here.
Michael has a great question. How can we get involved in volunteering to help? We're going to need extensive help from volunteers, and it's going to be strategized really well on what each people's role is once they're in the water, who's doing what. So we're working on that currently, of how we want to reach out to the community, how many events we want to have, are we going to have ongoing volunteers? But we will certainly be reaching out soon, once we have a little bit more done with permitting and everything, about really going for a strong volunteer and ongoing volunteer strategy to help us throughout the process, not just one big event or two big events. It's something that will likely need ongoing volunteership throughout the implementation project, and probably prior to us even putting things in the water, maybe assembling. So there'll be a lot to do, and we've been talking about it recently, knowing the extent that this project is, that we'll really need to put something strong in place to get volunteers.
And I just want to say, I just looked at my phone real quick. Steve Hafner's on the line from the Coastal Research Center at Stockton as well. I unmuted him real quick just to say hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Steve.
Doing a great job, Al. And I just want to confirm with you that when we did our measurements, the Hesco units only settled less than 3/10 of a foot. And we did see the accumulation of about 4 to 5/10 of material around them.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that, because I always get everything wrong when it comes to those numbers.
You got it right.
Chris has commented, sorry. Chris has commented a couple times about jet skis. They should be banned from coming within 300 yards of the pilot and the project. I'm not sure, is there any comment as far as jet ski use near the shoreline, or with reference to our projects while they're settling?
No, but that's a good topic for discussion. I didn't even think about that, Chris, of a boundary. I don't know if you can do a boundary. That's a question that I can bring up when I have my discussion with the state. That's interesting. I don't see, we'll have them marked navigationally. And of course, there's the navigation, stay away X amount from this or whatever, I guess. But it shouldn't, if we do SAV to the lee, if we have to go that route, it's going to be protected by those structures already. So I think that would decrease the possibility of fragmentation of beds.
Awesome. And let's see.
Let's take about 2 more questions here.
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Yep, Chris is Tony's neighbor, Chris Norton. Just, do we have more, not concrete, but just more of a timeline of sand being added in a phase 2 after this is done? Would it be months? Would it be years after phase 1 with adding sand? No, we don't.
We don't know. We don't know, but I'll tell you, the society, as we're doing this phase 1, we're going to be knocking on doors, not your doors, but on funding doors, and saying, hey, we've got this great project going in, and can we get funded for phase 2? So we're looking now, but I can't guarantee when we'll secure that funding to do the phase 2.
Awesome. And just something in general, we've spoke about, this is an impressive project for us, for your town, for everyone involved. And, you know, we really just want to make sure we dot every I and cross every T and make sure that what we're implementing is going to, you know, be successful in itself. We all know how concerned everyone is, and we're excited to do this work, and we want to see more done. We just, phase 1, you know, getting ready for it is where we're at. And
Yep. So we can take one more question if we have it. I see Tony's got his hand up.
right, and I think Barry had his hand up too.
Okay, we'll take Barry and Tony, and then we'll.
All right,
I have my hand up.
and Pat. Sorry. Let's see. Barry, do you still? I think you took your hand down. Do you? Sorry, I can
Yeah, I was going to ask, to me, it's great that things are going so well, but for people who live along there and the fears that they have of, you know, having a wave come in their back door, phase 2 is a big part of this. And someone asked the question already. My thing is that, you know, have we seen, or has there been any conversation with anyone whatsoever at this point? Was really my question was going to be as far as phase 2, because that's when the people who are sitting there watching the waves, that you know, the reef that we're creating is going to give them relief, but to give, you know, more assurance when there's dunes there, etc., and they're vegetated, etc. I think that's when people are going to feel a little less uneasiness as far as where they are along the bay. And that really was going to be my question. So if you
Yeah,
want
I mean, the simple answer is there has, and there is. So even though it's not funded, you know, we talk about that bigger picture. I was on a call or a Zoom or something the other day, and what they want, what the funders want to know is not just what you're doing as phase 1, but what's your bigger goal. And we're putting that out there constantly, saying, well, here's this, but we think this really needs to be done too. And this is what we want to see, you know, as the bigger picture. So it's not going to be a complete project. This grant will be complete of the project doing there. And then, like, you're right, Barry, the next phase, you know, is that. And yes, we do discuss it.
And someone had mentioned something about the gabion. Originally, we were talking about farther up on the north end of the beach, that gabion being a core for the dunes. I know there was discussion. I don't know if that's
that was a discussion, yes, and it still remains as one of those alternatives.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
All right, I'm going to unmute Tony.
Okay, this will be our last one, and then if anybody has a question, they can just kind of email or call.
Oh, I've been waiting all this time to ask my question.
Good.
All right, Tony,
Tony, are you here?
you can just call me.
All
right.
right.
No,
And-
let's just have Pat ask her question, then we'll take her question real quick.
Well, it does relate. I didn't know that Barry was going to make his comment, and his comment is right on. And I understand that this is phase 1. I am a person who sits here every day and sees those storms coming at my house and the whole beach, the whole community. Phase 2 is critical for storm protection. It's critical. And in order to properly fund it, it must be the whole beach, not part of a beach. I'm going to relate back to Graham's question. Is Lacey Township on board if funded? I use the caveat, if funded, with the living shoreline on the public beach property.
As far as I know, they are. So, you know,
Well, have you asked them? I mean, has that
We-
been asked and answered?
Pat, we have presented to them. We talked about phase two. We showed them phase two, and they seemed on board to me. And like I said, Veronica's participating in the team calls too, and the chief of DPW. So definitely, you know, I can't speak on behalf of the municipality, but in my eyes, we're definitely in that positive direction that yes, they are involved and they are a partner. All right. So guys, I hope we answered as many questions as we could. If you do have more, my email is right here at the bottom. You can just email me and I'll return it. Between one of us on the team, we'll answer your question. We're down there. So you're going to see us down there. Feel free to just walk up and, you know, talk to us and ask some questions that way. And again, this has been recorded and we will post it on our website. And I believe Lacey Township had posted the last one and they're going to post this one. So you'll have an opportunity, if your neighbor missed it, tell them, hey, check this out, you know, while you're eating dinner or however it works out. But definitely appreciate everybody being here. You can call us. My cell phone is not on here, but I'll tell you it's 732-589-5116. I do not have an office phone right now due to COVID because we're not in the office. So that's the best way to reach me if you want to just talk. But email is the easiest to get a hold of me or any of the staff. It's just our first name, Julie or Zach at littlersociety.org. And thank you very much. We'll talk to you guys soon. We'll be out there tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Jules, you can stop the recording.
I think yeah.